The first thing people whispered after Sunday service wasn't about God's mercy, it was about us. And the cruelest part? They didn't even bother to lower their voices when my daughter walked by. I could hear it, sharp and slicing, like the hiss of snakes hiding in the grass. I never thought my faith would betray me. The church was supposed to be my refuge after my husband never came home from Iraq, after the folded flag was pressed into my arms like a bandage on a wound that would never heal. Instead, the very place where I once knelt for comfort became the stage where my daughter and I were cast as outcasts, ridiculed for a truth too beautiful for them to understand. Her name is Naomi. She is 17, bright as sunlight and fragile as glass, though she'd never admit it. When she told me she was bisexual, her voice trembled, but her eyes burned with a fierce need. Instead, I pulled her into my arms and whispered, "You are mine. You are loved. That's the only truth I need." I thought my love would shield her. I didn't realize how quickly love could turn into a battlefield once again. The morning it all began, Naomi wore a pale yellow dress with tiny embroidered flowers, the kind that made her look like spring itself. We were late to church, and the pews were already filled. As we walked in, heads turned. Not the warm nods of fellowship I used to know, but cold stares, like doors being slammed shut in our faces. I held my chin high, my hand firm on Naomi's back, guiding her forward, refusing to let her see my knees shaking. When the pastor began his sermon, it was different. His words weren't about grace or forgiveness. They were warnings, wrapped in holy scripture, against those who betray God's design. He didn't say Naomi's name, but he didn't have to. Everyone's eyes slid toward us. My daughter shrank in her seat, and I felt the rage boiling inside me. I had buried a husband for this country, carried the weight of raising our child alone, and now the very people who claimed to be family were tearing us apart. After service, whispers turned into sharp words. "That's her. The girl who said she likes girls and boys. Poor woman, raising her child without a man." Naomi walked faster, but the words clung to us, thick and heavy. I wanted to shout, to remind them all that my husband had died for their freedom, that my daughter's truth was not a sin but a gift. But my throat closed, the weight of their judgment pressing me silent. That night, Naomi locked herself in her room. I sat outside her door, listening to the muffled sobs she tried to hide. I wanted to break the door down, to cradle her like I did when she was little, when monsters were only under the bed, not inside the people we prayed with every week. "Naomi," I whispered, "we'll get through this. I promise you." But promises are fragile things. The next morning, I opened the front door to find an envelope taped there. No name, no address, just words scrawled in black marker. "Your kind doesn't belong here." My chest tightened, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. I tore the paper apart before Naomi could see it, but she already knew. She always knew. School wasn't any kinder. By the third day, Naomi came home with her books scribbled on, slurs cutting across the covers like scars. When I called the principal, she sighed and said, "Teenagers can be cruel. We'll keep an eye on it." That was all. My daughter's pain reduced to a shrug. One evening, Naomi stood in the kitchen, her voice shaking as she asked, "Mom, are we cursed?" I froze. She wasn't asking about God or sin. She was asking why the world seemed determined to punish us for existing. I cupped her face in my hands. "No, baby, we're not cursed. We're tested, and we'll rise." But as I said it, I wondered if even I believed my own words. I had been quiet too long, silent when they buried my husband with words of honor that turned hollow the moment they judged his widow. Silent when the church twisted scripture into weapons. Silent when my daughter's laughter dimmed into shadows. Silence had kept me safe, but it was killing her. So the next Sunday, I did something I never thought I would. I stood up. The church was full, sunlight spilling through stained glass windows, painting the walls in gold and red. Naomi sat beside me, her shoulders tense, ready for another sermon that would slice her down to size. But when the pastor began, I rose to my feet. The room fell silent. My voice shook at first, but anger steadied it. "You talk about God's love, yet you turn away from my child. You speak of sacrifice, yet you spit on the memory of a man who gave his life in uniform while you condemn his daughter. Is this your mercy? Is this your faith?" Murmurs rippled through the pews. Some looked away in shame. Others glared. The pastor tried to interrupt, but I raised my hand. "I buried my husband. And if your church cannot honor that, then this is not God's house, it is a cage. Naomi's eyes filled with tears, not of pain this time, but of something brighter. Hope. For the first time in months, I saw her sit taller, her chin lifted, her light no longer dimmed. We walked out together, mother and daughter, hand in hand. The doors slammed behind us, but the golden sunlight outside felt like a blessing. The world had not changed in that moment, but we had. And that was only the beginning. The sunlight outside felt like a door opening, but it also revealed just how far we had to walk alone. The church had been more than a building. It had been the center of our lives, our anchor when grief threatened to drown us. Without it, we were suddenly adrift. Yet as Naomi's fingers tightened around mine, I realized maybe we didn't need that anchor anymore. Maybe we were meant to build something new. Still, loneliness is heavy. That week, the silence of the phone stung almost as much as the whispers had. Friends who once invited us to dinners no longer called. The women who used to drop off casseroles when Naomi was sick now avoided me in the grocery store aisles. Even family grew distant. My husband's sister, Gloria, a woman whose prayers once filled my kitchen with warmth, sent a single message. I'll always love you, but I can't condone Naomi's choices. Choices. As if love were something she could hang in a closet and pick out on Sundays. Naomi pretended she didn't care. She threw herself into her art, sketching late into the night, pages scattered across her bedroom floor. I would find drawings of girls with fire in their eyes, boys with wings breaking free of chains, people who looked like her caught between two worlds, yet glowing with defiance. Her art spoke of pain, but also of a future she was fighting to imagine. I wanted to frame every piece, to wallpaper our house with her courage. But the world had a way of finding cracks in our armor. One evening, as I cooked dinner, Naomi burst through the front door, her face pale and her hands trembling. They cornered me in the parking lot after school, she whispered. My chest tightened. Who? Her lips trembled before she forced the words out. Some boys. They said people like me don't deserve to live. One of them shoved me. I ran. I dropped the spoon, sauce splattering across the stove, and pulled her into my arms. My rage was volcanic, threatening to erupt. I wanted to march into that school, find those boys, and make them feel the fear they had inflicted on my child. But when Naomi's tears soaked through my blouse, I knew what she needed wasn't my fury, it was my strength. That night, I wrote letters. To the principal, to the superintendent, to the local paper. I wasn't just a grieving widow or a struggling mother anymore, I was a fighter again. They had taken so much from us already, but I would not let them take Naomi's light. Days turned into weeks, and whispers grew into battles. Some teachers stepped up, quietly offering Naomi support, slipping her notes of encouragement. Others turned away, afraid of the backlash. At the grocery store, one woman pressed my hand and whispered, "You're braver than I could ever be." Another spat on the ground as we passed. We were either saints or sinners in their eyes, nothing human in between. Naomi grew quieter. Her laughter, once bright enough to fill a room, became rare. She started avoiding mirrors, pulling at her sleeves, as if she wanted to disappear. One night, I found her on the porch, staring at the sky. "Mom," she said softly, "what if I don't belong anywhere? Not here, not at church, not even at school." Maybe it would have been easier if I never said anything. Her words cracked something inside me. I sat beside her, pulling her into my arms. "Naomi, listen to me. Belonging isn't something people give you, it's something you carry inside. And no matter what they say, you belong to me. You belong to yourself. That's enough to start." She leaned against me, her tears soaking my sleeve, and for the first time, I realized that survival wasn't just about standing up against hate. It was about teaching my daughter that hers was not something anyone could erase. But strength has limits, and mine was tested again when the church board sent a letter. Polite words wrapped around cruelty. They thanked me for my husband's service. They expressed sorrow for our situation. And then they made it clear we were no longer welcome in their congregation. I read the letter aloud to Naomi, my voice steady though my hands shook. She stared at me, her face pale. "So that's it. After everything Dad gave, after everything you gave, they just throw us out." "Yes," I said. And then, firmer, "But we don't need them." It was the first time I truly believed it. We started searching for something new. A place where Naomi could breathe without fear. A community that saw her not as a mistake, but as a miracle. It wasn't easy. Every door we knocked on seemed to close just as quickly. But then, one afternoon, Naomi came rushing home, her eyes brighter than I'd seen in months. "Mom, there's this youth group downtown. They meet every Friday, and it's for kids like me." Her voice trembled with hope, fragile but undeniable. My heart clenched. I hesitated, afraid, protective, but then I saw the way her shoulders lifted, as if she could finally exhale. "Let's go," I said. That Friday, we walked into a small community center painted in vibrant colors. Posters lined the walls, rainbows, raised fists, words like "love is love" and "we belong." Naomi's hand gripped mine tightly at first, but as soon as she saw kids laughing, hugging, existing freely, something inside her shifted. She let go of my hand. I watched as my daughter stepped into a circle of strangers who looked at her not with judgment, but with recognition. A girl with short hair and a nose ring smiled at her, and Naomi smiled back. The light returned, slow but steady, like dawn after a storm. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, we're going to be okay. Still, healing is not a straight line. Not everyone in our family welcomed Naomi's truth. When I called my own mother, hoping for comfort, she sighed deeply. "I raised you in the church, child. I didn't raise you for this." Her words were a knife I hadn't expected. I wanted to argue, to remind her of the nights she'd prayed for my husband's safety, the meals she cooked for us when grief nearly swallowed me whole. But instead, I said, "Mama, I won't apologize for raising my daughter to be herself." There was silence on the line, then the soft click of disconnection. I sat there, the phone heavy in my hand, tears burning my eyes. Naomi walked in, her face questioning. I forced a smile. "It's okay, baby. Some people just need time." But in my heart, I knew time didn't always heal. Sometimes it only revealed who truly stood beside you. That revelation came again when we attended a local vigil for victims of hate crimes. The park was filled with candles, flickering against the night sky. Names were read aloud, lives cut short by violence, by prejudice, by fear. Naomi stood beside me, her hand warm in mine, and I realized how fragile she was in this world, but also how strong. When it was my turn to speak, I stepped forward. The microphone felt cold in my hand, but my voice was steady. "My husband gave his life in a war thousands of miles away. But the war we fight here against hate, against prejudice, is just as real. My daughter should not have to be brave simply to exist. She should be free, and I will stand with her until the day she is." Applause rippled through the crowd. Naomi's eyes glistened with tears, but this time, they were tears of pride. As the candles flickered, I knew the battle wasn't over. There would still be whispers, letters, stares. There would still be days when Naomi questioned if she belonged. But we were no longer alone. We had found voices that echoed ours, hands that held ours, light that refused to dim. And as the night wrapped us in warmth, I held my daughter close and whispered, "This is our faith now. Love. Always love." The night of the vigil stayed with us like a candle that refused to burn out. But light attracts shadows. And soon, the backlash arrived. A week later, my mailbox overflowed with envelopes. Some held kind words, letters from strangers thanking me for speaking, parents who whispered that their own children were like Naomi, but too afraid to come out. But mixed in were others, venomous and cruel. Words scratched in jagged handwriting. "God will punish you. Your daughter is an abomination. Leave this town before we make you." Naomi found one before I could hide it. She held the letter in shaking hands, her lips moving as she read. I wanted to snatch it away, to shield her eyes, but she looked up at me and said, "They want me to disappear." Her voice was quiet, steady in a way that frightened me. "But I won't." That night, she pinned the letter to her wall next to her drawings. A reminder, she said, of what she was fighting against. Family made the cruelty worse. Gloria showed up on my doorstep one Sunday afternoon, Bible clutched in her hand. Her face was drawn, her voice tight with urgency. "You're leading Naomi straight into hell," she said before I could even invite her in. I stood tall, though my chest ached. "I'm leading her into herself, into truth, into love." Her eyes hardened. "You dishonor my brother's memory." The words cut deep. My husband's face flashed before me, the way he laughed, the way he held Naomi on his shoulders, the way he promised he'd come back. And now, his own sister used his name like a weapon. "Don't you dare," I hissed. My voice shook, but not with fear, with fury. "Don't you dare use his sacrifice to shame his daughter. He fought for freedom. Do you think he wanted her to live in chains?" Gloria's lips trembled, but she turned and walked away, muttering prayers under her breath. I closed the door, my whole body trembling. When I turned, Naomi was standing in the hallway, eyes wide. "Mom," she whispered, "they'll never forgive us." I walked over, placing my hands on her shoulders. "Then let's stop asking for forgiveness." But anger doesn't erase pain. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering how much more my daughter could bear, wondering if I had the strength to keep standing when the world was so determined to break us. The next challenge came from within our own community. At the high school, Naomi's art teacher nominated her for a statewide competition. Her paintings, portraits of faces half hidden in shadow, bursting into color, were raw and breathtaking. But when her portfolio reached the school board, they rejected it. No explanation, just silence. I stormed into the principal's office. Why was her work disqualified? He adjusted his glasses, avoiding my eyes. Some felt the content was inappropriate. Inappropriate. I snapped. It's art. It's her truth. What's inappropriate is teaching kids to hate themselves. He shifted uncomfortably, lowering his voice. "Mrs. Carter, I sympathize. But you have to understand you can't invite controversy." I laughed bitterly. Controversy? My daughter isn't a controversy. She's a child. A brilliant one. And if you can't see that, then maybe you're the one who shouldn't be here. I left his office shaking, fury boiling in my veins. Naomi deserved better. She deserved a world big enough for her voice. That night, I told her what happened. Her face fell, but she surprised me by lifting her chin. "Then I'll make my own gallery." And she did. With nothing but poster boards, markers, and tape, Naomi filled the walls of our garage with her art. Friends from the youth group helped. They brought music, snacks, laughter. Soon, our garage transformed into a sanctuary of color and courage. Kids who felt invisible at school came to see themselves reflected in her paintings. Parents came, too quiet, hesitant, some with tears in their eyes. Word spread. Local reporters showed up. Naomi's garage gallery became a symbol of resistance, of hope. And for the first time, my daughter's smile wasn't shadowed by fear. It was wide, unashamed, radiant. But the brighter she shone, the harder some tried to snuff her out. One morning, we woke to find the garage door spray painted with slurs, crude drawings meant to shame her. Naomi froze, her breath catching in her throat. I felt the old rage rise again, hot and suffocating. I grabbed a bucket and scrubbed. My hands burned from the chemicals, my arms ached, but I kept scrubbing until every trace was gone. Naomi stood beside me, silent, tears streaking her cheeks. When I finally looked at her, she whispered, "They'll never stop, will they?" I dropped the sponge and pulled her close. "Maybe not, but neither will we." Days later, we received an invitation from a local civil rights group. They had heard about Naomi's gallery, about the vigil, about the speech I had given. They wanted us to speak at their rally. Naomi hesitated. "Mom, what if they hate us even more after this?" I cupped her face, looking into her eyes. "Then let them hate. Hate means we're loud enough to be heard. But love, baby love, is louder." At the rally, Naomi stood before hundreds of people. Her voice shook at first, but then it grew stronger. "They tried to tell me I didn't belong. That who I am is wrong. But I am here. I am not ashamed. And I will not disappear." The crowd erupted in cheers. I watched her, my heart swelling with pride, so fierce it nearly broke me. My daughter, my brave, beautiful Naomi, had found her voice. And yet, in the quiet of the night, fear still lingered. Fear that the world would punish her for speaking. Fear that I couldn't protect her from everything. Fear that love might not be enough. But then I'd see her laughter echo through our home again, her art spreading across walls like sunlight, her eyes bright with defiance and hope. And I knew whatever came next, we would face it together. We were no longer asking for a seat at their table. We were building our own. The rally changed everything. For weeks afterward, Naomi's name spread through town like wildfire. Some praised her bravery. Others spat her name like it was poison. I knew we had crossed a line we could never step back from, but I also knew we had finally stepped into the truth. The storm hit one night in the form of flashing red and blue lights. Someone had called the police on us. The officers claimed they were responding to a disturbance, but when I opened the door, all I saw were neighbors gathered on their lawns, watching, waiting. I could hear the whispers even through the walls. That's the family. The troublemakers. Naomi stood behind me, her body trembling. I forced my voice steady. There's no disturbance here. The officers looked around, unconvinced, but with no evidence. They eventually left. Still, the damage was done. Naomi's hands shook for hours afterward, and I held her until dawn, my fury burning holes in the night. The next day, I made a decision. Fear would not own us. We started attending city council meetings, speaking out about harassment, about the hate Naomi faced at school. Some officials rolled their eyes, others shifted uncomfortably, but a few leaned in, listening. Slowly, cracks began to form in the wall of silence. Naomi, too, grew bolder. She began mentoring younger kids at the youth group, children who were just beginning to understand themselves. I watched her kneel beside a shy 13-year-old boy who whispered, "I think I might be like you." Naomi smiled, squeezing his hand. "Then you're exactly who you're meant to be." Her strength left me in awe. My daughter, who once cried behind locked doors, now stood as a pillar for others. She was becoming the woman her father would have been proud of. But strength doesn't erase grief. One evening, Naomi found me staring at the folded flag in its wooden case, the one they gave me at her father's funeral. "Do you ever wish things were easier?" she asked softly. "All the time," I admitted. My hand traced the glass over the flag. "But easy doesn't make us who we are. Hard does. And look at you, Naomi. Look at who you're becoming." She leaned her head on my shoulder, and for a moment, I felt my husband's presence between us, like he was still guiding us, still holding us up. As spring turned to summer, something remarkable happened. The garage gallery expanded. Local artists donated supplies. Community groups asked to host workshops, and kids who once hid in the shadows now filled the space with laughter and paint-stained hands. Naomi's art was no longer just drawings, it was a movement. The same reporters who once whispered about scandal now wrote headlines about resilience. One even asked Naomi what gave her strength. She looked straight into the camera and said, "My mom. She taught me that love is the loudest voice we have." My throat tightened when I heard it. For all the battles I had fought, all the nights I had doubted, those words were worth every scar. Still, not everyone celebrated. Hate remained, sometimes quiet, sometimes loud. At the grocery store, an old church friend cornered me. "You're raising her to live in sin," she hissed. I looked her in the eye and said, "No, I'm raising her to live." Then I walked away, leaving her stunned in the aisle. I had spent too many years bowing my head, too many Sundays letting others define my worth. But not anymore. One sweltering afternoon, Naomi painted a mural on the side of the community center. It showed a black woman strong, radiant, holding the hand of a biracial girl. Behind them rose a sky of gold and violet, with words stretched across it, "We rise together." When she unveiled it, people gasped. Some cried. Others clapped until their hands turned red. I stood beside her, tears streaming down my face. That mural was user story, our fight, our love. But the mural did more than honor us. It lit a spark. Families who once hid in silence began to speak. Parents called me late at night, whispering that they, too, had children like Naomi. Some asked for advice. Others just wanted to hear that they weren't alone. I told each of them the same thing. Love them louder than the world hates them. As summer faded, a letter arrived in the mail. This time, it wasn't hate. It was from a church one across town. They had heard about Naomi, about the gallery, about the mural, and they wanted us to visit. My heart raced as I read the words aloud. Could it be real? Could faith still hold space for us? That Sunday we went. The sanctuary was smaller, simpler. No stained glass windows, no polished pews. Just wooden chairs, sunlight streaming through plain glass, and people with open faces. When the pastor spoke, his words weren't about condemnation. They were about love, radical, inclusive, unconditional love. Naomi squeezed my hand. For the first time in a long time, I felt the warmth of faith wrap around us without judgment. After the service, people came up, smiling, welcoming, asking Naomi about her art. No whispers, no stares, just kindness. That night, Naomi sat at the table sketching again, her shoulders relaxed, her laughter bright. I watched her and realized something. We hadn't just survived, we had built something new. But the fight wasn't over. It never would be. There would always be those who hated, those who judged, those who turned love into weapons. But we weren't afraid anymore. We had faced the storm and found each other still standing. On the anniversary of her father's death, Naomi and I stood at his grave. She placed a small painting against the headstone, a portrait of him holding her as a baby, his smile wide, his eyes full of love. "Dad," she whispered, "I hope I'm making you proud." I placed my arm around her shoulders. "He is proud, so proud, and so am I." We stood in silence, the wind rustling the grass, the sun casting golden light across the stones. For the first time in years, the weight on my chest felt lighter. As we walked back to the car, Naomi turned to me. "Mom, do you think it'll ever get better? Not just for us, for everyone like us." I looked at her, my brave, beautiful daughter, and smiled through my tears. "I think it already is. Slowly. One voice, one story, one act of love at a time. And we're part of that change." She nodded, her eyes shining with hope. And in that moment, I knew the journey wasn't over. But we weren't walking alone anymore. We had found a new family, a new faith, a new way forward. Love had carried us through loss, through hate, through silence. And love would carry us still. Always love. Thank you for listening. Like and subscribe to get notifications about next videos.